When it comes to a number of chronic health issues, there can be a systemic underlying cause that is often overlooked. And it turns out that for a number of people, one of the root causes of what is causing a wide variety of health issues can be something called Candida. And today I am absolutely delighted to be talking with my guest, Dr. Brad Montagne, who is going to help us break down the information that we really need to know about Candida and what we can do about it. Brad, thank you so much for being here today.
Yeah, it's an honor to be here. I'm looking forward to this. I think it's gonna be fun.
Yeah, me too. Before we start diving into the topic at hand, can you tell us how you became the doctor who focuses on that?
Real simply, I started having chronic health issues when I was a really young kid. I think the first time I woke up with gut-wrenching pain, I was about 5 years old. Rushed out of the hospital, and I don't know how many times I went back then. They called it inflamed intestines. They did whatever they did. You go home, and that started a lifetime of all kinds of things. I've been plagued with a multitude of chronic health issues, chronic ears, fungal infections, Candida infections, Lyme disease, and never got any answers from anybody else. But when I was a kid, we went on a summer vacation up in the mountains. I don't know what happened. I'm sick. I felt like I had the flu 24/7, 365 days a year for years on end. Vertigo so bad, had a hard time standing up. And I learned back then, I started cooking when I was 5. I learned back then that if I cooked my own food and ate different than the rest of the family, I felt better. And that's probably where my journey started, somewhere between 5 and 7. And Lord just led us down a whole bunch of different paths to bring me to where I am today. We've been doing functional medicine for close to 40 years, pretty close to 40 years of postgraduate education in that. And so I've got a huge background.
Yeah, it sounds like it. And so that actually brings up the question of what is Candida and why is it such a root cause? Like you were talking about having vertigo and stomach issues and all these other things. Why is Candida a root cause to so many different body systems being out of whack?
Okay. I'll tell this story and this kind of will whet the appetite and then I'll answer the question. I just met somebody recently who had asthma. They were in the basement of a house we were looking at, and they hold their chest and try and take a breath. And I asked if they're okay, and they showed me their inhaler, and they are using over-the-counter one. And I said, asthma typically ties into gut dysfunction, and food intolerance is gut dysfunction. And he goes, no kidding, that really makes sense. We said a few things. He goes, that's really interesting. I've been having a lot of blood in my stools. Sometimes I think I'm going to have a bowel movement. I fill the toilet with blood and there's no stool in there. And I go, okay, so that ties in with that. And I said, you look at your body shape, classic adrenal, you're really square, really boxy. The thorax gets thick, both front to back and wide. Face is really round, classic moon face of adrenal issues. And typically you get some belly fat with that. And so you just got a classic body shape with that. And that typically comes out of the gut too. And he's going, man, that really makes sense. I've been going to all these doctors. Nobody knows what's going on. And what you're saying is really makes a lot of sense. So you can't run across or you can't make things like what I just set up. Hippocrates, the father of medicine, said that all disease starts in the gut. And science has proved that out to be pretty much right. When we look at it, it's actually the gut's called not an internal organ, but an outside organ because what enters the gut never touches the rest of the body. and it exits back out. So they
Mm-hmm.
call it more like an outside organ as far as that goes, but it controls every aspect of health.
Mm-hmm.
That's where we get all of our nutrition. There's if you take the gut, it's about probably the diameter of your little finger for what, about 25 feet, a little blowing out for the stomach. And then it goes for about 22 feet without size. And then it's about size of 1.5 fingers, the last 5 feet called the colon. If you measure the diameter of that, you use math and you figure it out, it's about 6 square feet of surface area.
Mm-hmm.
But the lining of the gut is lined with something called microvilli. And if you hold your fingers up in front of your face, the microvilli look like your fingers sticking up. And in between all your fingers, the microvilli that secrete mucus, and that mucus is where all the bacteria inside your gut hide, the
Right.
microbiota or flora. And it's the microbiota that interacts with all the food that's up above it. The food doesn't look like it ever touches the gut at all. That's the foundation for everything. That flora, if we look at the fingers, if you hold those up in front of your face, that's what the microvilli look like. Microvilli, they secrete mucus, and in the mucus, all the flora hides. The flora is a bacterial coating that does the bulk of your digestion inside your gut. That flora is a balance of bacteria, virus, yeast, some parasitic issues and all that. And it all works in this harmonious balance. It should be. When you talk about Candida, for some reason, the healthy bacteria is what keeps the Candida in check, and the parasites in check has gotten beat up. It's depressed quite a bit, and the Candida is overgrown.
Mm-hmm.
It should always be there. You won't be able to kill it, but it needs to be in balance. And whenever you're talking about Candida, it's an overgrowth. And the Candida will typically grow in all your mucous membranes, eyelids, inside the nose, mouth, down the throat, inside the ears, women's reproductive tract, is almost all identical of the bacterial coating that's in there. Grows in each one of those places a little bit differently, but it's pretty much controlled by the gut
Mm-hmm.
function. And the flora, it communicates with the brain. It controls a lot of brain function. It makes every hormone that we have. It makes all the neurotransmitters that make all the nerve connections work inside the brain. It controls every aspect of our life. And you think, wow, that's interesting. These foreign bugs are controlling all of our life, but they really do. And it's the flora that does the digestion that goes on inside of us. So if we look at something simple like food, you're either going to ferment your food, digest your food, or rot it. And that
Mm-hmm.
is completely dependent on how much time it spends in the gut and what the flora is. If it's
Sure.
yeast, you'll ferment it. If it's bad bacteria, you'll rot it. And if it's
Mm-hmm.
good bacteria and going in the right transit time from mouth to toilet, which should be 14 to 18 hours, then you're typically digesting it.
Mm-hmm.
And something that's really interesting about this microvilli, it increases the surface area of the gut about 400 times.
Wow, that's
And,
amazing. So, if I'm hearing you correctly, because we can build up these pockets of imbalance or overgrowth, it then can essentially begin to systemically impact different areas of the body and begin to cause things like you were talking about the person who had asthma. But I know also for some people, they can get rashes or they can get mucosal overgrowth or other things. What are some of the other ways that Candida can impact health?
okay, what you just said, we'll answer that with a mechanical question. And
Sure.
then it makes a whole bunch more sense. Well, normally, we try and eliminate our toxins through the bowels and the
Mm-hmm.
bladder, and that should go in the toilet. When the body gets too toxic, it tries to eliminate things through secondary elimination organs. That's the
Mm-hmm.
skin and the lungs. So whenever you get rashes, it's because the body's too toxic. We got a few different routes of introduction to toxins through the lungs, from
Mm-hmm.
airborne toxins through the skin, liquids, things like that. By and large, most of that comes out of the gut. When the gut's not working properly, and whenever there's an upset going on inside of the microvilli like this, something mechanically happens. The microvilli is like you make a fist and all those microvilli atrophy, so you're just looking at your knuckles.
Mm.
And the layer just below those microvilli gets really thick. That's where half your immune system is,
Mm-hmm.
down in there. Once those start to atrophy, the gut leaks like a sieve. It lets undigested food particles get into the bloodstream. It
Mm-hmm.
lets parts of bacteria and parasites and
And that can lead
yeast.
to things like delayed hypersensitivity and all kinds of inflammation.
Exactly. And all that blood supply coming out of the gut is supposed to go to liver, and the liver
Mm-hmm.
is supposed to catch it and stop it. But if there's too much going there, the liver gets overwhelmed. It can't do it, and it goes globally through the rest of the body.
Yeah.
So most of the things that go on from something like a Candida overgrowth or a gut problem comes from this toxic overload that goes through the
Mm-hmm.
entire body. If we don't eliminate the toxins into the toilet, then the skin and the lungs, they try and pick up the slack. And what they
Mm-hmm.
can't get rid of, it deposits in the fat tissue first. And then the
Right.
rest of the tissues, and the more toxic the tissues become, the less the immune system recognizes it as self, as
Mm.
me. And when it gets to certain toxicity, the immune system starts to attack the
To
cells.
invade. Right.
There you have all your cause of all your autoimmune issues. And
Mm.
there are some studies, I think it's in the American Journal of Pathology, where people with autoimmune issues, you heal the gut and autoimmune issues resolve.
So I have another question for you then. Like it sounds fairly straightforward. You discover you have this bacterial imbalance, you yeast and other things going on, candida overgrowth. And so why does it seem to be so hard to get rid of if you've got it so that you
Okay.
can resolve that and reclaim health?
Okay. A couple of really big reasons. When we look at the overgrowth, there's all kinds of different ways that can happen. Chronic stress,
Mm.
steroids, NSAIDs, that's things like aspirin, Motrin, leave, all that.
Right.
Antibiotics, those are really huge. Food intolerances can do that. Heavy metals can do that. You have all of these different pathways that create it. And, I wrote a book called Exposing Lyme and Chronic Illness, and I propose in there which you should have got that in the mail today. It was,
I don't know. I'll check for it.
yeah,
I haven't been to
uh,
my mailbox yet.
all that up here just so anybody can see what it looks like. Anyway, what I propose is every one of those things is not a different mechanism.
Mm.
And essentially what happens, you get an inflammatory response inside these microvilli, and it starts to
Right.
make them atrophy. When they atrophy, they start to leak. Then stuff
Mm.
leaks in underneath the microvilli, and the immune system starts to get into a hyperactive mode,
Mm.
which it ends up going to attack all of the cells that line the gut,
Right.
blow these great big holes in it,
Mm-hmm.
and then you got anything can get into the bloodstream with all that. Once you atrophy the microvilli, there's no mucus and no place, no mucus for the formaldehyde, and no place for the formaldehyde, period. Once
Yeah.
that happens, there's no check and balance.
Mm.
And your immune system, our immune system, was not designed to ever deal with Candida. The reason why is the all of the structure that makes all the structure of the yeast. There's four forms of these. You got a yeast form, a fungal form, a fungal parasite form, and a mold form is always closely associated with it.
Mm.
Once you wipe out all the checks and balances, The structure that makes all of those forms is called chitin.
Okay.
Chitin's the same thing as the outside shell of a bugs like beetles,
Yeah.
shrimp, things like that. You look at shellfish, that's calcified chitin.
Okay.
Chitin is immune to your immune system. Your immune system can't touch it. What keeps it in check and balance is your flora.
Mm.
So when you wipe the flora out, there's
Then you don't.
nothing to stop this
Uh,
from growing.
sure.
And all these people are doing all of these different approaches to try and address it that don't really address the problem, because
Hmm.
you've got to deal with rebuilding the microvilli, rebuilding the gut wall, getting rid of all the inflammatory reactions and all that before you can even hope to. At the same time, you're dealing with a flora, and it takes months. It's harder to deal with Candida and clear it than Lyme disease, which is another
Wow.
thing we do a lot with. You can
Yeah.
clear every aspect of Lyme disease with all the parasites months before you can clear Candida.
Another question then, and this is coming from my perspective as a nutrition educator, and I'm sure you as someone who is very focused on functional solutions to root cause issues. What are some of the recommendations that you would have for nutritional support to help rebalance the system and help tamp this down so that we're not dealing with so many of it sounds like a body on fire.
It
Uh,
is. Yeah,
yeah.
very good description. First thing is you got to know what your food intolerances are. The
Mm.
lab tests for those are only 2 to 3% accurate. They're really not worth the money to throw at them to do anything. That's all
Brad,
they
I'm
are.
so sorry. I'm so sorry. Can you back up for just a second? You said lab test and then you froze.
Okay. When you look at the lab tests for food intolerances, they're only 2 to 3% accurate. That's
Mm.
all.
Wow.
And the reason why is only 2 to 3% of the responses to foods are immune mediated. The
Mm.
other 97, 98%, they have no idea what they are, what causes them. Food intolerances, they change the blood flow in your brain. They
Mhm.
change your mood. They change psychology. They change function in every organ system that you have. The way we test food intolerances, we can tell not only if you're reactive to it, but what organ systems you're the most reactive to and all that. So there's a few classes of foods that are just no one can eat. And I've got blackballed from some places for addressing this. But when that happens, I said, surely you can't be promoting people to be eating toxic things.
What do you include in that toxic category? I'm curious.
When you look at GMO foods,
Yes.
GMOs are wagging the dog to keep people off of what the real issue is.
Mm-hmm.
GMO is, you were just saying earlier that you like to garden. GMO is too weak to survive by itself in
Yeah.
nature. So it takes herbicides and pesticides to keep it growing because it can't fight those things off, especially in the nutrient depleted soils that we grow all our crops in.
Right, because the glyphosate that is typically sprayed wholesale on those things is a chelator. So it's binding those minerals in the soil so that they then are not available to the plant.
It binds them inside of the plant and makes it so they're unavailable. It shuts down their immune system. It
Right.
does the same thing inside of
Us.
all animal life.
Yeah.
So every class, reptiles, insects, birds, fish, mammals, and we're mammals.
Mm-hmm.
So what it does is it takes your major minerals and glyphosate or Roundup's 4 times worse than glyphosate. They put some
Yeah, there's other things in there. I know
right. What
say
they
that.
do is they basically put a soap on it. It's a
Mhm.
saponification, so
Yeah.
it spreads out and it's just 4 times worse. But
Mhm.
atrazine that they use on corn,
Mhm.
it's a pre-emergent. What that means before the the weeds sprout. It
before it
kills
sprouts.
them.
Yeah.
That's what a pre-emergent is. Roundup and glyphosate is a post-emergent. After they sprout, it kills them.
Mm-hmm.
So they use both in things like corn. The atrazine is so bad it'll take male frogs, turn them into females. They can produce fertilizable eggs that turn into tadpoles, highly mutagenic. All
Yeah.
of the herbicides, they are hormone disruptors. They typically go after estrogenic receptors. They really knock out a woman's reproductivity. Things like atrazine will. When males are given atrazine in puberty, they don't develop into adults.
Wow.
It's
So
really
then,
huge.
what are some of the good things though that we can add? What are some
Okay.
of the
Well,
nourishing foods that are
well,
good
first,
to support the
first, you,
system?
first you look at what's toxic, and you got to get that out. That's the
Right.
most important thing. Corn and anything grows off of corn. There's 1,000 different names for corn. The
Yes.
whole dairy industry
Love it.
runs off of corn, so
Yeah.
those two are out. Wheat is sprayed with Roundup. Just 95% of the wheat crop in America sprayed with Roundup just before harvest, anywhere from
Mm-hmm.
2 days to 3 weeks. It's always toxic. So those and sugar,
Mm.
those wreak havoc. All the bad stuff that people want to avoid grows off of sugar.
Right.
So first thing is you get rid of those. The second thing you need to upregulate elimination, which is increase your fiber intake.
Mm-hmm.
When you look at the societies that have no incidence of gastrointestinal disease, their bowel
Right.
habits are 3 to 5 times a day.
Right.
That's what normal is. We had heard of one person said that they had a girlfriend at one time. She only went once every 2 or 3 weeks.
Oh,
She ended up coming in. We worked with her, and she got giddy when she started going 3 times a day. Her life just changed.
yeah.
Our record was once every 5 to 6 weeks.
Mm.
You talk
That's
about
just
toxic
terrible.
and
And
sick.
so there's not that many people out there that it's that severe, but I do know in my practice, I frequently get people who only go perhaps twice a week. And
Yeah,
that's just not normal, folks. You should go
right.
every single day.
Yeah,
And be
for
aware.
anybody that's sick, they have to go at least twice. You
Yeah.
should never accept less than twice. So if we look at what fuels that, the two best foods to fuel an increase in bowel habits is legumes, beans,
Mm-hmm.
and squash.
Mm.
Hands down, those are absolutely the best for fiber and nutrition. You can, legumes are a lot cheaper protein than what most people are eating. And
Mm-hmm.
as long as you balance a legume with a good clean rice, you're doing really well. California grown rice doesn't have the toxic issues in it. A lot of things like Lundberg's is really clean, Cocoa Rose is really clean,
Mm-hmm.
Nishiki is a really clean source of rice. So if you balance your legumes and rice, you're going to have pretty much a balanced protein. So that's really good. All of the vegetables that are vogue, they all have gone GMO with all the
Mm.
herbicides and pesticides. Kale has really gone vogue, and it's really hard to find clean kale. But
I know I
color,
was so sad when it made it onto the Dirty Dozen list.
yeah,
I was like, oh, a couple of years ago that happened. That
but
was
but
great.
right next to kale is collard greens. They're
I
under
know.
everybody's radar.
Spinach
They're
and yeah.
collard greens. Mustard greens are some of the healthiest foods out there. And the weeds that grow in people's yards are
Hmm.
some of the healthiest.
I know things like
That's a good,
purslane and so. So the weeds are healthy if they're not being sprayed with
exactly.
toxic chemicals. Like you can eat the dandelion, the nettles, the purslane, as long as you're not spraying your yard. Unfortunately, I think if you live in a more suburban area, chances are high that those yards are sprayed or that there's drift from your neighbors.
And that's a real consideration. People think that organic food is a safe thing. It's not. We've tested multitudes of organic food, and we know a lot of people that worked in the industry. They
Mm,
cheat all of the time. They have the same herbicides and pesticides as your non-organic farms. They just hide them at inspection time. So you're way better off getting your food from a local farmer's market where you can talk to the people about their growing practices.
right. Right.
Non-certified organic is the cleanest you can find anywhere.
Regenerative is great because they're really focused on that cycle of soil health and plant and animal health. It's really definitely going to have much more connection to the deeper nutrition and to the cycle of how things grow. So I
Yeah,
think
that's a permaculture thing, which my wife's dad he used to teach master gardeners when she was
Mhm.
young, soil biology, soil health, plant health, and all that. So she
Yeah,
grew up with that. I ended up studying the same thing that he did, and it's
amazing.
amazing science with it
Yeah,
all, but it all comes back
I'm
to
sure.
food. It
Right.
really
And I
does.
love that. It all comes back to food, to nourishing our body, to making sure that we are getting foods that are actually going to be supportive and sustaining for us. So whole
Yeah,
foods, real foods.
which you talked a moment ago about the Dirty Dozen.
Yeah.
There's a couple sources that you use ewg.org.
So I know that's what most people use, and they're the ones who do the most of the research for that.
Yeah, 'cause I've heard that Consumer Reports is more accurate
Hmm.
than EWG. There's some things that EWG say are clean that we know they're not.
Hmm.
But you look at things like avocados, they used to be really clean. Bill Gates came up with this new coating called a peel, which is
Yes, I know. It's terrible.
it's extremely toxic. It gets all over all kinds of inside of the foods that are
Yeah.
there, and it makes what used to be clean not clean anymore.
Mhm.
And you look at the different suppliers that supply vegetables,
Yeah.
which another thing about food, if every healthy society, 50% of every plate is vegetables.
Mm.
So
Yeah.
if we change the way we eat to that, we just change our health in a huge
Yeah.
way. When you look
Absolutely.
at suppliers that are out there, Publix has made a statement they will not stock anything that has been sprayed
Mm.
with a peel. Trader Joe's, they started doing it, but they quit and they refuse to stock anything with that. Whole Foods won't answer. They say you need to talk to whoever's on the floor, or you go have them go back in the back and see what box they pulled it out to find out what it is they
Mhm.
refuse to market.
Yeah.
Um, so it's becoming really a difficult thing to find places where you can shop and get clean foods.
Sure. And again, I just want to say that it when it comes to taking care of our health and being, we need to make sure the gut is healthy and we need to make sure that we are nourishing our bodies.
Yeah,
Brad, this has been really wonderful. You have really taken us on a deep dive into the topic. And
yeah,
I
and
know it's
we've
good because I think people need to understand the different aspects of it. And we're not really taught how our bodies work. So I appreciate the explanations that you shared with us and all of the information. So this has been really good. Thank you so much.
yeah, and we've just barely scratched the surface of the subject. People are
Sure.
interested. We could do a couple follow-ups and uh,
Absolutely.
and fill the subject up a whole much more. There's so much in it.
There is so much in it. You're absolutely right. And so, for anyone who would like more information, I am going to put Dr. Brad Montagne's information down below so that you can connect with him. I'll also put a link to his book, Expanding Lyme and Chronic Illness,
Yeah, yeah.
Exposing Lyme and Chronic Illness. And so, be sure to check out those links below. Thank you so much for watching. And remember, in all you do, to make today a healthy day. Bye, folks.
All right. Thanks. Bye.